SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Calling all coin collectors. The second annual North Mississippi Coin Show is back at the Crossroads Arena, Friday and Saturday, March 14th and 15th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Free parking and free admission. Corinth Coin Show at the Crossroads Arena, March 14th and 15th.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music. Morning there, Rhino.
Howdy, howdy.
Man, oh man, we got a little taste of that spring over the weekend. Sunny skies, moderate temperatures. But we got some storms moving in tomorrow.
Potentially. There's a threat of some severe weather tomorrow afternoon for various parts of the Magnolia State.
Okay. Well,
but between now and then, a lot can happen and a lot can change. So
hope that doesn't happen.
Hopefully tomorrow we'll be updating and going, false alarm.
Yeah, I hope you're right. It seems like of late, every time these storms move through, they are associated with, the fronts move through, I should say. They are associated with severe storms and tornadic activity. What's the deal with that? Oh, please don't tell your buddy Greta Thunberg. Don't tell her.
Well, she's not even worried about climate change anymore.
Well, you told me
she's
about
all
that.
in for the Palestinians.
Look at me. Isn't that right?
Pretty much.
Oh, man. So this just in, by the way, you remember us talking about this beneficial ownership information reporting requirement for U.S. citizens and domestic companies? I know this is probably not the top issue of the day, or certainly from the weekend, but it literally just broke. And bottom line is you got to do a whole bunch of stupid paperwork if you're an owner of even the very small business, and it's all intended, ostensibly, purportedly, to combat money laundering. Well, the Treasury Department just announced that they are suspending the enforcement of this outrageous, incredibly invasive beneficial ownership information requirement for U.S. citizens. This is a Biden rule. It is a disaster for small businesses in particular because it's so expensive. You better get you some accountants and lawyers and make sure it's all done properly. And by the way, if you don't, fill out the paperwork exactly as the Biden Treasury wants you to do it. You could be fined substantially. This is good news. This was a dumb policy, would produce nothing. Just more burden on American businesses, something the Democrats don't seem to appreciate or understand. Oh, they got plenty of money and plenty of time. Just have at it, right? Never really considering that these onerous regulations actually cost money to do that sort of stuff. Money we don't have, and they don't have. Meanwhile, what about this dust-up on Friday? Of course, I was in my vehicle at the time. Scott Sands filled in for us. And I was in my vehicle listening to this thing live. I was just staggered. I couldn't believe it. that Zelensky would come into the Oval Office of the White House of the United States and make demands, interrupt the commander-in-chief, regardless of what point he was trying to make or request he was bringing forth. His comportment was totally inappropriate. Now, I don't think that was expected, right, Rhino? You had all the press there. Have you ever seen anything like that in the Oval Office?
Not live with the press present. I mean, it's the Oval Office. It has been the setting for many a heated conversation between the President of the United States and world leaders and differing opinions between government officials. But usually the public only finds out about that if there was somebody taping the exchange. Like, for instance, there are audio tapes out there of Dwight Eisenhower when he was president chewing out an ambassador in a way that would likely get him in some hot water nowadays. There are tapes of LBJ telling just some of the filthiest jokes imaginable. There's a tape of, I think it was JFK, dog cussing an Army general because he got caught in a scandal buying some expensive couch for his office with tax dollars. All of those things, I would say, are a little bit more explosive than a heated disagreement between Zelensky and Trump and Vance. But, yeah, I mean, the Trump derangement syndrome has got a lot of people with blinders on, and any chance they get to take any angle on President Trump, they're going to try. So you've seen a lot of people talking about how, they ambushed Zelensky the war hero, and blah, 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 blah. No, this is Zelensky being Zelensky.
Right.
This is the third time they've tried to sign this thing. He was the one that had the idea of, let's go sign it with Trump. And then he pulled that crap.
Well, right, we had brought it to him, had we not, for signature, right? And he said, no, let's go there. And I guess the point I'm making is, meetings in the Oval Office, especially heads of state, in the typical configuration, the setting you see there, the president and his entourage around him and whomever the other dignitary is and their entourage around them, and then a whole bunch of privileged press, if you will, that are authorized to cover whatever the event is in the Oval Office. It's a place where you're supposed to have positive, respectful, courteous, cordial discussions, usually before or after some significant event. In this case, it was to complete the discussion for the press to witness and perhaps answer some questions. The president of this country is always good about accommodating the press in that regard. What a complete 180 that is from the prior president. And then they were to retreat to the East Room there in the White House for an extravagant lunch. They were going to sign the papers, enjoy lunch, and a discussion, celebrate. But no, Zelensky had to run his dang mouth and interrupt and talk over the president. And the president rightfully said, you're playing with World War III. You don't have any cards to play, dude. And what Zelensky said, we're not playing cards here, Mr. President. What the hell? And then you got oceans between us, or between you and the East. And that may put you in a position now where you don't feel directly the impact, but you will feel it. And President Trump said, you don't dictate to us what and how we're going to feel. Bravo. That was insane. And instead, the president, he instructed, you saw that Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Security Advisor Mike Waltz to go instruct or basically go inform, not instruct, inform President Zelensky You got to leave this place. We ain't
You ain't got to
having
go home,
lunch.
but you can't stay here.
We ain't having lunch today. And what they do, I think they fed the White House staff.
Yeah, the press staff got to eat the fancy lunch.
That's awesome. That was great. Now he says he's ready to make a deal. In the meanwhile...
Because he went over to Europe and started counting the beans and went, that ain't going to be enough.
Exactly. They've stepped up, has the UK and I think some other, even Macron in France, they've said, we got more money for you. But you know what? They need to fund more. It's already disgusting that we've sent all this money and all these assets.
But the talking point is that the European Union, with all those countries combined, have sent more to Ukraine than the United States.
And that's absolutely true. But they should. I mean, so
it's
what?
It's their backyard, and we're talking about between 20 and 30 countries versus one.
Who are a few miles literally away from where this is occurring? Who have way more to lose than we do? Like it or not, we do have an ocean. Thank God we're blessed to live in this country that has these natural protective barriers. They're called oceans. I agree.
They make it difficult to project power.
Right. But I think it's now come to light that the Democrats, they advised Zelensky to turn the deal down.
That's what it seems like.
Can't stand the fact that the president may get a victory. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio, Senator Walter Michel is at 10:35. District Attorney Matthew Barton at 11:05. This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Now back to Middays with Gerard here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth studio. Thanks so much for joining us. If the report is accurate, the EU is not giving money. They are offering a loan. Well, all of it could be construed as a loan, but up to this point, they have provided significant funding. There's all kinds of rhino information. You've seen this. I don't know exactly what the figure is. I could find you 20 reports from so-called reputable sources, and they all got different figures. You agree?
Yep.
There's absolutely no consensus of how much this country's given, how much the EU's given. And then, of course, Zelensky says, he even said it in the meeting Friday, well, you guys gave us $182 billion, but we can't find but 100. He still says that. I don't know what the heck the truth is, honestly. And then I
would imagine there is a significant amount of U.S. aid and other foreign aid to Ukraine that has wound up in suitcases at various generals and admirals' homes, simply because I've seen the reports of it.
I don't doubt that.
On the other hand, I believe not to explain it away, but the explanation for the discrepancies in the dollar amounts you see reported is simply because the dollar amounts are more of a catch-all. It's more of an easier way to discern and distribute the information, because in reality, there's a whole lot of equipment being sent, and the equipment's of varying degrees of readiness and retiredness. That's not the correct way to say it, but you got some equipment that's on its way out, some equipment that's on its way up. It's all getting shipped out. You do have some money being sent. You do have other aid items being sent. Like, you got all this stuff. So instead of trying to list off an itemized list of here's everything this country sent, here's everything this country sent, here, you just compile it into dollar amounts. But when you do that, everybody's calculation of the dollar amounts is different.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You've heard the president often use the figure $350 billion. I have found more alignment on the foreign press sites. And honestly, the BBC, the Daily Mail, what's the other big outlet in the UK? They're fairly reputable news outlets, I would say. The other one is it the Israeli Times, the one that the main newspaper out of Israel? It's actually fairly good, I found. But
until like the last 6 or so years, Al Jazeera was fairly
I was about to say the same thing.
Balanced.
I was about to say the same thing.
They've kind of gone off the deep end the last few years.
They've gotten a little more opinion focused in their reporting than fact focused. Would you agree?
They're having their own CNN moment.
Yeah, I agree. But that's absolutely true. I think most people would be surprised to know that. I think you and I could both say that we've actually used reports right from that particular outlet here on the show because they tend to be credible.
Yeah, and at one point in time, I could take it pretty much at face value. I mean, I would always double check, but it didn't have to be as rigorous. Whereas nowadays, if you pull something from them, it's like, all right, well, I pulled it from them. Let's go see if I can find anybody else that has this take on it. Yeah, I'm fairly certain I won't.
That's absolutely true. But nonetheless, there doesn't seem to be a consensus on it. I really wish the Congress, somebody there, would step up. Maybe our own Senator Roger Wicker, who chairs Armed Services. I think it'd be good, would it not, just to settle this? Just tell us how much it is as Americans. Now, something else, guys, we got to point out. Anytime you hear references to money that's going out the door in Washington, I don't care what it's going to, whether it's going domestically or to FEMA or to immigration, which we all object to crazy USA ID spending, insane amounts of money, or to Ukraine. Anytime you hear that referred to as taxpayer money, just keep this in mind. It's partial taxpayer money, but more of it's actually borrowed, which is even worse. Because if you look at the math of the revenue that goes to Washington and the expenses that go out, you take Social Security, Medicare out totally because that revenue that comes in is for those programs. Just look at the income tax revenue. Look at the personal income tax revenue. It's $2.4 trillion a year. And once you take Social Security and Medicare out of the equation of total spending, which amounts to about $2.5 trillion in a $7 trillion budget, that brings you down to $4.5 trillion on everything else. Well, we don't send but $2.5 trillion of taxes. That means we're borrowing $2 trillion as we are to cover that. So when we're sending money to Ukraine, it's even worse. We're borrowing money to do that. That's insane. And where does that show up? In the interest tab of $1 trillion a year. That's where it shows up. And, of course, on the debt ledger, now north of $36 trillion.
And the ever-creeping devaluation of the dollar.
As a result. Right. So here's what bothers me. We're 11 days away from the federal government running out of money again. Here we go. Remember, it wasn't too long ago we passed another continuing resolution to keep the government open until March the 14th, at which point we'll look at it again like we have been for the last 3-4 years. Just keep kicking the can down the road. Here we go again. Looks like we're poised for the same. And we've got these two budget resolutions, one in the House, you guys know about that, one in the Senate. The Senate doesn't address extension of or making permanent the Trump tax cuts. The House does, one big, beautiful bill, plus some spending cuts included as well, and some additional spending also incorporated for energy and immigration and some other purposes. But when I looked at that, Rhino, this is hard for me to even fathom. I want you guys to listen here. This bill, of course, remember, all these bills are 10 years, right? They're all the figures, as we've talked about so many times, because that's the way the scoring is done by the CBO. 10 years. $86 trillion of spending. $86 trillion. It's hard for me to even pronounce the words. $86 trillion over the 10-year period. You can do the math. That's an average of $8.6 trillion per year. Pre-pandemic 2019 period, $4.3 trillion. Double an average from a short 6 years ago. $86 trillion. With a $4 trillion debt limit increase as requested by the president and accommodated by both House and Senate, and that's for 2 years. That indicates our Congress believes that we will continue to produce $2 trillion deficits. $2 trillion per year. That, unfortunately, is inherently inflationary. And there are numerous signs that inflation is about to rear its ugly head again. I don't think to the extent we saw in 22, the insanity of the 9% CPI in June of 22 did come down. Latest report, 2.6%. Still high. Still high. Cost of living still every bit as a problem as it was. But one thing that ain't going to fix it is $2 trillion deficits. It's going to exacerbate it. What we need are to get these pro-growth policies implemented as soon as possible for those to start rippling through the economy so that more revenue will be produced while we put the quietus on the spending. The problem is we got Social Security and Medicare that are on autopilot. Nothing's going to change. That's going to continue to go up. And by the way, that's what's driving all the deficits. It's coming from those programs plus Medicaid. And, of course, the Democrats, are they ever clutching their pearls and gnashing their teeth and having a freak out because of the instruction from the Speaker of the House to the committees regarding Medicaid. You got to cut Medicaid, guys. It's out of control. $80 billion a year is what they're looking for in cuts. The Democrats are absolutely melting down. And the hyperbole and the fear-mongering is insane about that. Well, we're going to take a break right here. We're coming right back with Senator Walter Michel. He'll talk about his recent wine legislation and everything else going on there at the Capitol downtown Jackson. Stay with us.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert, here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio, kicking off a brand new week. It's our pleasure to welcome now Walter Michel. He's a senator who represents District 25. That includes Hinds and Madison County. Senator, good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning, Gerard. Thank you for including me this morning.
Yes, sir. So we wanted to talk to you about the wine legislation. Man, oh, man, it seems like we've been working on this for a while, but we might have a breakthrough. Tell us about that.
Well, we have. It's been a long time coming, Gerard. I know I've personally worked on this direct ship bill for 8 years.
Wow.
The bill has, for one reason or another, typically died in committee each year, and it's such a close vote. I have to give credit to the retail package stores. They've done a good job of fighting it in the committee, but this year it passed out of committee on a very slim vote and got to the Senate floor. And one thing that makes it difficult is that legislation, because of the taxation in it, requires a 60% passage. And we brought it up on the floor, and it failed the first vote by just a couple of votes. and we put it on a motion to reconsider and brought it up the next morning, and some of the votes changed, and the bill passed the Senate, and the House took it and passed it as exactly verbatim as we had passed it. It's gone to the governor. It's my understanding the governor has signed the bill, so we now be able to have direct shipment of wine in Mississippi. We'll be the 48th state to do that. I'm sorry to say it took so long, but we now can do it.
Senator, explain to the audience now, what will this allow residents of Mississippi to do that they presently cannot do? What wines would be available? How would this work?
Well, the first thing to know is that there's over 10,000 wineries in the United States, over 10,000. And
wow.
We typically think of Oregon and Washington and California. California does have almost 5,000 of them, but there's wineries in just about every state. Matter of fact, since this bill is passed, I've had people personally contact me and tell me, one said when she visits her family in Virginia, she's got a favorite wine that she's tasted anywhere in the whole country. It's in Virginia, but she can't get it shipped to Mississippi, so she's going to now have that shipped to her. And another person that you wouldn't think, the state of Michigan being a big wine state, another person told me that they go on summer vacations there, and they love the wine that's produced there in Michigan. So it will allow wines that are not readily available in Mississippi. We have an inventory limitation at our ABC warehouse. Mississippi is a liquor control state. Every bottle of wine that's sold in the state of Mississippi comes to us in the Gluckstadt warehouse and then is shipped all throughout the state by way of truck, to whether it be Biloxi on the coast or all the way up North Mississippi to Corinth. So there's the limitations on how many wines that we can literally inventory in the warehouse. Wines account to about 60% of the inventory or the floor space of our warehouse, but they produce only 40% of the revenue. And you say, well, how does that such that happens? And one of the reasons is because the number one selling wine in Mississippi right now that takes up a lot of floor space is a $6 bottle of Mad Dog, believe it or not. So we're selling $6 bottles here and making the tax on that when we've got people willing to pay $100, $150, $200 for a bottle that we're going to put a 15.5% tax on, and the state will not even have to inventory that product. That product will be shipped directly to the consumer, and the tax will be remitted from the winery straight to the state. So it's the best of both worlds. We don't have to risk breaking one of those bottles in our warehouse and paying for it. We just simply collect the tax, and the consumer gets the product.
Yeah. So would residents, Senator, be able to buy wine that is stocked or distributed by ABC?
What was the first part of it? Would residents what?
Yeah, would they be able to buy wine that is stocked and is distributed by ABC?
No.
Okay, just want to make sure.
No, we're typically talking about boutique wineries.
Okay.
The products that are going to be available here. That's one thing we wanted to make sure we didn't compete with our retail outlets. This is not for the $10 bottle of wine that you can readily buy here. Because of the way the tax structure works, it'd be more economically feasible for you to just go to your liquor store and buy a $10 or $20 bottle here. Many of these wineries require you to have a membership, to pay a membership fee in order to get the product. And then some of them say, okay, if you're going to get a membership, you're going to have to guarantee that you'll buy a certain amount of product each year. Some of them, but some of them will sell smaller quantities. So economically, it's not going to be something that competes with our local retailers, because it's so much easier just to go and buy here and get a cheaper bottle of wine. This is for more expensive bottles that we cannot inventory in Mississippi. We don't have the floor space in the warehouse.
Okay, and so would the same taxes be applied?
Well, the tax structure is a little different because the winery, let's just pick California since that's the most populous wine state. They're going to charge a retail sales tax in California, so that tax is going to go to the state of California.
Okay.
But we're going to make that winery buy a wholesaler's permit. They're going to register with the state of Mississippi. The permit is only $100, so nobody's going to have any motivation to try to cheat the state out of $100. They'll make that profit back on the first sale they make in Mississippi. But when they pay that tax, then they're going to add 15.5% fee to the case of wine, and that 15.5% fee is going to be remitted straight to the tax commission.
Okay, because that's actually a significant chunk of revenue, is it not, to the state? All the various taxes at the different levels that are generated through the distribution and sale of alcohol.
It is. 15.5%, of course, is more than double of our state sales tax.
Wow.
Many people say we don't have wine in grocery stores. Well, we really do have wine in grocery stores right now. If you go to a big store, you'll see wine all over the place with it, but that's because it's limited to about 4% alcohol or less.
I see.
And that, of course, is just taxed at 7%, and all the different beers and craft beers that we have now in Mississippi, some as high as 9.5% alcohol, they're taxed at 7%. So this is double the tax. But these consumers have proven, someone's gone out to a winery and they have a product that they really like, just like the Amazon model. We need to be able to make it available to them. That's about the only thing I can think of that you can't buy through internet seller.
And so these wineries, they presently have systems that allow people to buy wine and have it direct shipped to them now. So, I mean, there's no change there other than, I guess, they would be made aware of the change in our laws that they could permit Mississippians to purchase.
Yeah, well, currently, if they're abiding by Mississippi law, if you're at a winery and you tell them you just had a tasting and you really enjoyed that wine and you'd like to have a case shipped to Mississippi, they're going to look at their list and they say, sorry, Mississippi's one of 3 states we can't ship to.
Huh.
Now, if they break the law, some people that will try to circumvent that law and maybe have it shipped to a relative's house in an adjacent state, and then when they go visit them, they'll go pick up the product. Well, in that instance, the state's getting no tax on that product.
Yeah.
So this is a way for us to appease the consumer and get the tax at the same time.
What kind of feedback have you received from the retail liquor stores in Mississippi?
I have not personally heard from anybody. Obviously, this issue has been out there.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, I've introduced the bill for 8 years in a row. They know it's been out there. I will say this. Over the years, the retail stores have told us that, if we would give them some concessions, that they'd be interested in allowing the direct shipment. We've done things like allow liquor stores to have tastings in their stores. We've also allowed them to sell other products. We actually passed a bill a few years ago that if you had a expensive wine that you tasted at a boutique and you wanted to have that wine shipped, we allowed that to be shipped to the liquor store and you go pick it up at the liquor store. But that just didn't work very well. It just has not led to much in the way of sales.
Okay, I got you. Before we go, what do you think about the debate over taxes, tax reform, different bills, the House and the Senate? You think we'll get something there?
I believe something. There's a lot of commonalities in the legislation. Both chambers are interested in reducing taxes, and I think just it's going to take. We got 4 weeks left in the session, and I believe you'll see something happen there.
Well, let's hope so. Back to this issue I got on the text line I'm looking at. Is there any chance that we may open up this direct ship to other than alcohol products other than wine in the future?
Well, the Spirits Council would love to have been part of the bill, but you got to walk before you can run, and
sure.
We just felt like that was complicating the issue too much. You could get, like I just said, you can order anything from Walmart, from Amazon. You can get just about anything shipped to your house, and it does seem kind of strange to not allow products such as that to be shipped directly to you. One other thing we have, I think one of the other reasons that maybe some of the senators and House members have changed their vote and voted in favor of this is we have bills every year that come up with different items that are sold at convenience stores like vape and hemp and CBD and kratom and all these items that the consumer can step right out of the store and ingest or whatever, they smoke it or vape it or whatever, and then get behind the wheel and drive it. Having something shipped directly to your house where someone over the age of 21 has to be there to sign for it is not a bad way to do things. Yeah, absolutely. Senator Walter Michel, always good to talk to you, my friend. Thanks for coming on. Thank you, Gerard. Have a great day. You bet. You too. We're coming right back, folks, in the Element Well studio. Don't forget Matthew Barton, District Attorney, 23rd Judicial District of Mississippi at 11:05. All you gotta do is put a drink in my hand. Yeah, fill it up, I'll throw it down. I got a little hungover, still hanging around. Yeah, that hair of the dog is howling, hey there, man. All you gotta do is put a drink in my hand. That hair of the dog is howling, hey there, man. All you gotta do is put a drink in my hand. Now,
You're listening to Middays with Gerard here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Oh, Gavin Newsom's got him a podcast, huh? That's what the world's waiting for. Unbelievable. So the United States Post Office looks like that this approach, this new plan to place them under the Department of Commerce to see if they can stop the bleeding, billions, $9.5 billion they lost last year. $100 billion, I believe, since 2007. I'm not sure the situation could be rectified. I just think it's a bad business model that's not viable. Can improvements be made? Absolutely. Can we stop the red ink? I don't think so. I don't care who's running it. The outgoing postmaster, General Louis DeJoy, he warned in November, I remember talking about this, that the agency must continue to cut costs or it would face a government bailout or the whole thing would just collapse. And that's where we are with respect to the post office. Again, there is a little bit of uniqueness in the way, by law, they have to fund future obligations of retirement. We talked about this a little bit last week, and it does, to some extent, exaggerate their losses from an operating perspective. In the accounting world, they call that the matching principle. But that situation ain't getting any better. It's like every other public sector retirement system in the country. They're all upside down. I'm exaggerating a little bit. Some of them are actually funded appropriately. But generally, when you investigate those, Tennessee is an example. It is not facing the same dire situation that Mississippi's public employees retirement system is. But if you compare those side by side, you'll find that the Mississippi plan is much more generous. And also just has a completely different funding model. On the C Spire text line, I think we got the questions answered with the senator with respect to wine only, not beer. Jerry in Corinth asked about that. Wine only or other alcohol too on the 601. Will it be just wine or liquor too on the 662? Mike in Gulfport, now that I've quit drinking, they passed a law. Do away with the ABC. Jerry in Leesburg says, I promise you, Jerry, that is something that has been considered and investigated and modeled. The problem is that, Rhino, there's so much in our state that is difficult to change, to make improvements, because we're saddled with some bad decisions made a long time ago that are now legacy and entrenched. PERS is such an example. What's set in motion, its financial headwinds were decisions made in the 90s. With respect to ABC, when Mississippi decided to allow the sale of alcohol, I don't remember the exact time frame of that, but the idea was, you heard the senator say it, 15% taxes. When you look at all the various layers, well, that generates a significant amount of money. I think it's about $120 million a year to the general fund. So you can't just say, be gone with that. Well, where do you get the $120 million from? It's complicated. A couple of years ago, there were hearings down at the Capitol in the period between sessions when lawmakers looked at various ideas and models to try to get out of the alcohol distribution business. I actually testified to explain the Mississippi Lottery Corporation model. That was being considered as a possibility. But we ended up doing nothing because they just couldn't figure out. At the time, I think Rhino was like $95 million a year or something. And that has increased since then. I guess we're drinking more, maybe. Or I think a lot of it's because the price has gone up, right? So you're taxing a different baseline of sales and at the distribution level as well. So that's the problem, is that we built this financial model where we rely on that income from the ABC. And we just hadn't been able to figure out how to create a new model. Because if you said, hey, let's hire a private company to come in here and do that, well, they're going to expect to produce a profit off of that, and that would reduce the tax revenue that flows to the general fund. Tough deal. But I think it's great, and I appreciate Senator Michel for shepherding that legislation through. How many years, Rhino, he say he's been working on it? 7, 8, something like that? Seems like every year you and I discuss this during session, and it's just another yawn or, didn't happen again.
But now it's law.
Yeah, now it's law. That's a great day, in my view. I think this is a win for free markets and a loss for protectionism. Now, if we can just get to a few other things while we're at it, like retail vehicle sales and education and mobile sports betting and certificate of need laws, all of which are protected by the government. We're coming right back after Fox News and SuperTalk News with Matthew Barton. He's a DA in Mississippi.
Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher.
Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We are live in the Element Wealth studio for Hour 2 of the program on this Monday. Don't forget, Ricky Matthews with Super Talk Outdoors will be on at 12:05. But right now, it's Matthew Barton, District Attorney for the 23rd Judicial District of Mississippi. Matthew, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, glad to be here.
All right, so we wanted to have you on and talk about the MICE Act, M-I-C-E. I'm not exactly sure what the acronym stands for. You might want to explain that to us. But tell us about this legislation, how you got involved, and what it would mean for Mississippi. Now, it hasn't passed. It's dead, right? But this isn't going away.
Yeah, so MICE stands for Mississippi Immigration Custom Enforcement. It's basically a Mississippi version of ICE, is where acronym comes from. And I guess my involvement really stems from earlier in the year. That I think would assist in my work that we do. And a bill was mentioned or dropped in the House. It started a conversation, and I think that the fact it's the natural progression of that conversation.
Rhino, I think we're going to have to do it. I think we're going to have to call him. So, Matthew, we're having problems with the connection. We're going to call you, get you on. While we're doing that, I wanted to pass on this little bit of fodder to you. It looks like Steak and Shake. They're changing how they're going to make their French fries. They say they've RFK'd their fries. They're opting for a healthier cooking method. Say that rather than using vegetable oil, they're going to be using beef tallow. I'm not exactly sure what that is. They broke this news on X. Said by March 1, all, in all caps, locations, fries will be RFK'd. Wow. Some of the other fast food restaurants appear to be following suit with respect to how they make up their French fries. How about that? We found a supplier, says Steak and Shake. They could finally do what we wanted and said, we got to do it. We got to do it everywhere. And so we did. That's what the CEO of Steak and Shake chain said. That's interesting. He's the chief operations officer, actually, Daniel Edwards, talking about this. So I think Rhino's working on getting Matthew Barton back on the line with us to talk about this MICE Act. That's interesting news. Also, Robert Wright, he wastes no time, of course, bashing the president and Doge and everything else. He wrote an absolute book. We good, Rhino? All right, we got Matthew back. All right, Matthew, keep going. Tell us about this act, how you got involved.
Yeah, so, I was speaking with legislators early in the year about the needs of my office and the fact that we're having a surge of illegal immigrants coming through our local jail. It's almost one every day. And so we're trying to be involved and try to help at a state and local level, because that's what Tom Homan and Kristi Noem have mentioned a necessity for. And so we had a bill that was dropped in the House. It died in committee, but I believe that bill sparked a conversation that led to the eventual Senate bill, which was dubbed the MICE Act. And so the whole idea was just to create a mechanism for Mississippi to be involved in helping ICE with the Trump agenda and their priorities for deporting criminal illegal aliens.
Interesting. And so a great deal of the goal here, is it not, Matthew, is to get local law enforcement to work cooperatively with the state and federal authorities on combating this immigration problem.
That is 100% the goal.
Okay. And why do you think we couldn't get this thing passed? What were the objections in the Mississippi legislature?
I'm not sure what the objections were. I don't want to name drop on here because I don't know how people feel about me bringing them into it, but I had several talks. I went down to Jackson a couple of times, and I did not receive criticism. Mike McClendon sponsored the bill or wrote the bill, and he was receiving good feedback from a lot of people. We have a supermajority Republicans in Mississippi, and a lot of these people ran on, supporting Trump. They used his name and rhetoric to get elected. And if you think of the lieutenant governor race with Delbert Hosemann and Chris McDaniel, at one point they were both kind of arguing over who was Trump's chosen one, so to speak, who had his blessing. And people ran on that, and then when it comes time to support them, they really missed an opportunity here.
Interesting. So I didn't track the bill. Did it make it out of committee?
It did not.
Didn't make it out of committee. And which committee was that?
It was an appropriations bill, so I guess it went to the appropriations committee. I
got you. Senator McClendon, of course, from your county, right, DeSoto County.
That's right.
Yeah. And it looks like he has been subject to some redistricting. Looks like his district's changed quite a bit, and I think he's maybe thinking of some other options there.
Yeah, I know he's been working hard on, his priorities, but he's been doing a lot of self-defense too. He's been taking on water from all sides with this new map. Yeah.
So, have you talked to other district attorneys? How do they feel about this legislation and just this overall plan?
I did not really coordinate with other prosecutors on this. I just looked at our internal data and the cases that we have, and I spoke to our local legislators to begin with and let them run with it. So I didn't really do a lot of lobbying with other prosecutors, so to speak. But I have spoken with other prosecutors about immigration issue in general, not necessarily as it relates to legislation. And I can say that my county is not the only county that has an issue with criminal illegal aliens on our court dockets.
Interesting. Well, what about arrests, Matthew? Have you made any of your office of illegal immigrants, and what can you share on that?
Yeah, so we have, in the last 4 years, we've had over 1,000 people come through the DeSoto County Jail that were illegal aliens, which is more than twice the 4 years prior to that. Last year, we prosecuted a guy, last name Perez Lopez, who was drunk behind the wheel and killed a lady. So we prosecuted her. I have a case right now, Mr. Escamilla, who is charged with raping and molesting a 12-year-old girl. We had a high-profile arrest in DeSoto County of a guy that's charged with federal drug trafficking. We had one that was a home invasion with the intent to commit a sex act. So we've had the gamut of everything from fentanyl dealers, DUIs, all the way up to your more violent stuff. And it's coming up regularly.
Interesting. Have you seen a decrease since President Trump has taken office? Certainly the reports are that crossings at the border are down rather dramatically.
Yeah, so we've had a steady flow in the jail. My office has worked with ICE to get some deportations done. We've had several deportations done, but as far as the ongoing arrest, I would say some of the felony stuff is a little bit down, but the traffic stuff where people don't have driver's license and insurance, which is particularly scary if you get in a wreck with somebody, and DUIs, that's been pretty steady, and a lot of those are people that came through under the Biden-Harris administration.
I see. Well, like I said, even though this thing didn't make it out of committee this year, is this something you're going to continue to promote and advocate for? You believe it's something we need?
As long as I keep seeing this problem in my office, I will continue to advocate for public safety. So at every chance I get, I will advocate for enforcing the law. I believe that Mississippi prioritizes and values the enforcement of our laws, and so I will advocate that we do that.
I see. Are there some situations in other states that you could point to that have been implemented, such as this?
So Florida's done a lot. They are actually getting their highway patrolmen and their officers involved in what's called the 287G program, which we were trying to get that accomplished with MICE. Oklahoma's working on trying to clear out their jail docket of illegal immigrants that are on their books. Most of the states in the Southeast have passed some form of legislation within last year or this year in varying degrees.
Yeah.
But Mississippi has not at all.
I got you. All right, Matthew Barton, District Attorney for the 23rd Judicial District of Mississippi. Appreciate you coming on there, Mr. Attorney. Enjoyed the conversation.
Hey, thank you.
You bet. We're coming right back in the Element Well studio.
The Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's do this.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi. Let's go.
We're back with you in the Element Well studio. Appreciate our guest today, Senator Walter Michel, talking about the direct shipment of wine, now law in Mississippi. Matthew Barton, District Attorney, 23rd Judicial District, discussing his ideas about how to combat illegal immigration here in Mississippi and really in the country overall. Wow. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around $86 trillion, by the way. That is just astonishing, staggering, all the other various hyperbolic adjectives that could be used. Oh, my gosh. It's just a bunch of money, isn't it? And it's coming up here real soon. Meanwhile, Elon Musk says Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. Well, I don't know about that. It just depends on how you, I guess, define the Social Security program vis-a-vis what a Ponzi scheme is. no doubt, Bernie Madoff, he was involved in a Ponzi scheme. Of course, the name comes from the first person who ever perpetrated such a scheme, right? I don't remember his first name, but his last name was Ponzi.
Charles Ponzi.
Charles, okay. So, bottom line is that you promised unattainable returns on an investment. Just give me your money, and, like Bernie Madoff did, wow, the rest of the market is earning 5% as an example on this investment. I can get you 10. I got special connections. Red flag, BS flag ought to come up on that. Well, that's not exactly the way Social Security works. It can invest your money, except in one security. I know we've explained this many times. And that one security are special bonds issued by the United States Treasury. I submit if it were allowed to more diversely invest your money, it wouldn't be in the trouble that it's in. But earning the absolute lowest return possible from an investment perspective and investing in what are called special bonds that are issued by the United States Treasury, there's no doubt. That's put the program on unstable financial footing. So I don't know that Social Security ever promised any sort of high returns like Charles Ponzi did or Bernie Madoff did. But there's no doubt the model is broken. And by the way, if you think Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, well then you'd have to apply that same label to the public employees retirement system because they're basically the same, except the difference is the PERS program is allowed to invest in securities and investments other than the single security that Social Security can invest in, those S bonds. The managers of the PERS fund invest it in accordance essentially with the parameters set by the board, but they've got a bunch of commonly held equities, for example, in the portfolio. I think last time I checked, Rhino, Microsoft, the number one holding in the PERS fund. So, but even then, it struggles to make ends meet, and it's mainly based on the number of people working and paying into a program and the number of people getting benefits out, and that ratio has just shrunk considerably over the years. 1965, it was about 5-to-1 working people to retirees and Social Security, and now it's about 2-to-1. So that's put a lot of pressure on the program, no doubt. Republicans are getting worried about the president glossing over the high prices Americans are paying in this country, and seems like that the price of eggs is the litmus test, and I think that's a wrong one, honestly. There are some other factors that are involved, mainly the bird flu, which is not behind us yet. Some supply chain issues that are driving prices up, and it's not any policies one way or another that caused that. But nonetheless, people don't care. The reality is, whomever's in the White House, they get all the credit when it's going great, and they are also saddled with the responsibility and the culpability when it's not. That's just the way we are. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think it's fair to say that's been pretty consistent through the decades. So I certainly hope we see some breakthroughs there, and I hope that the president discusses that tomorrow night in his speech to the nation. Who did we decide is doing the rebuttal tomorrow night? I don't know. One of the female Democrats. I can't recall her name. Somebody, honestly, I don't think I've tracked in the past. It's scheduled to deliver the...
Alyssa Slotkin.
Okay. Where and what is she?
Senator from Michigan.
Oh, a senator. Okay. Well, it's odd for me not to know a senator. That means she doesn't do a lot. I don't see or hear a lot from her, I guess. Because there ain't but 100 of them. I'm pretty good about remembering who those are. But if inflation remains stubborn, there's no doubt this is going to be a
she
factor.
Replaced Debbie Stabenow.
That's why I didn't know. Yeah, who was there, who replaced her husband, right? Not so long ago. So, and Stabenow was a huge Biden surrogate and supporter. Huge. And every time she talked, it's like I'm shaking my head. No, that's not right. What you're saying is completely wrong. Kind of like old Robert Reich out there, who's just going crazy over the weekend. And he's blasting what he calls the oligarchy and corporate power. Oh, my gosh. What does he say? A few Senate Republicans have explained to their constituents that they voted to confirm Robert Kennedy Jr. as Secretary of Health and Human Services because he's hated by Big Pharma. And old Bernie Sanders, he's back. And he, of course, describes this budget that is making its way to the floor in the House, and a framework's been passed at this point. But the final draft of the bill will have to get voted on as well. It's just a framework that they've approved. And he, of course, is blasting both the Senate and the House bill as giving tax breaks for millionaires. But this idea, this narrative that he and Reich and so many of the other Democrats are promoting, that tax breaks, what they call tax breaks, I don't even think there is such a thing. Allowing you to keep the money you legitimately earned, that ain't a tax break. That's ridiculous. That assumes all money and wealth emanates from the government. That is such a wrong-headed view, but that's exactly how Democrats feel. Whatever I let you keep, we're just being generous here. We're being charitable, altruistic. But now they're promoting this idea that the wealthy are stealing, literally using the word steal to describe extension of the Trump tax cuts. They're stealing from the less fortunate, and they invoke the old G word, greed. If you want to keep more of your money, that's just being greedy. That's what they say. But no regard for the opposite, right? If you think you're entitled to the money others legitimately earn, no, that's not greed. That's just righteous and virtuous and humane. It's sickening every time I hear that. But now I don't think I've ever heard it quite described as stealing. Was it Milton Friedman, I think? He famously said that. Why is it greedy to want to keep the conservative economists from the University of Chicago? I studied him when I was studying economics and just became honestly enamored with his wisdom. But I think he's the one that famously said, okay, so if you want to keep the money you legitimately earn, that's greed. But if you covet and you believe you're entitled to the money that others earn, that's not. That's where we are.
Welcome to the double standards of the Democrat Party and the BS their entire platform is built upon.
And I wonder if folks remember, we may have to dig it up at some point, Rhino, when I remember this live. He was famously on the Donahue Show. Remember Phil Donahue? Who was it on Saturday Night Live that used to portray him? I think it was Phil Hartman. And Donahue was always, of course, running around in his audience. And Hartman kind of exaggerates that, like falls to his knees. And he's crawling up the aisle to get to a guest. But Friedman was on there. Donahue, of course, was a flaming liberal. And he talked about greed in markets and government and its involvement in the economy. He says, did Friedman, a society that puts equality before freedom will get neither. That's so good. We're stepping aside for a break. Half an hour of middays coming up.
Bring it on. Middays with Gerard Gibert. It is on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. It was actually, although Milton Friedman has a lot of thoughts and a lot of famous quotes and statements about this concept of greed, it was really Thomas Sowell, the economist, who said, I've never understood why it is greed to want to keep the money you have earned, but not greed to want to take somebody else's money. So perfectly stated. By the way, Ryder, would the DEI crowd be mad because I'm actually praising a quote from a black man? That would be Thomas Sowell. Can you do that?
I'm sure they would have some pretty unsavory things to say about him. Because he's not 100% in lockstep with their nonsensical narrative.
I see. So you not only have to meet a certain physical profile, you got to be in lockstep, as you say, with the ideology. Okay, I got it. Well, that's dumb, obviously. All for attention.
That's why they start theirs with a D.
So
D in Democrat stands for dumb.
1979, I'll set this up for you, the Phil Donahue Show. Maybe one of the first really big-time national daytime talk shows. He I think, could be largely credited with pioneering that concept. He was very successful, married to Marlo Thomas, extremely left-leaning in his worldviews. But I'll have to applaud him. He had Uncle Milty, as I call him, the famed economist Milton Friedman, who makes more sense than anybody I've ever heard or read about economic issues and policy. Here's a little minute clip for you where Milton Friedman talks about greed.
When you see the greed and the concentration of power with it, did you ever have a moment of doubt about capitalism and whether greed's a good idea to run on?
Well, first of all, tell me, is there some society you know that doesn't run on greed? You think Russia doesn't run on greed? You think China doesn't run on greed? What is greed? Of course, none of us are greedy. It's only the other fellow who's greedy. The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests. The great achievements of civilization have not come from government bureaus. Einstein didn't construct his theory under order from a bureaucrat. Henry Ford didn't revolutionize the automobile industry that way. In the only cases in which the masses have escaped from the kind of grinding poverty you're talking about, the only cases in recorded history are where they have had capitalism and largely free trade.
Man, 79. You think he got it? You think that applies today more than ever? You hear him talk about Russia and China? And I submit that the problem is the people that point to that and say greed, just like we heard Kamala Harris on the campaign trail, the grocery stores are engaged in greed. We're going to implement price gouging. That'll fix it. Well, which grocery stores are doing that there, Madam Vice President? I mean, just stutters and stams and no answer to that. Maximizing profit is not greed. Does anybody listening or watching, do they not attempt to maximize the profit of their personal work product? Of course they do. Is that greed? No, not whatsoever.
I mean, if you've got a bass boat you're trying to sell and somebody shows up and goes, well, you're asking $18,000 for it. Will you take $6,000? And you go, you mean $6,000? No, $6. Is it greedy to tell them get lost?
Unbelievable. Exactly. So I believe in fact, it's Sowell that gets it right. It's the Democrats that are saying the billionaires are stealing from the poor people or those that, I'm not even going to call them poor because they're not all poor, that are receiving benefits from the federal government, that somehow that's greed. Well, heck, I say it's just the opposite. The people who say, I'm entitled to your work product, to your assets, which is what the Democrats are saying here. That's greed. Coveting and receiving the possessions, the assets of others without some equitable exchange of value, that's greed. When you legitimately produce a profit because society says, I like what you're doing. I'm willing to pay you for it. That ain't greed. We all benefit from that. Why don't they get this simple concept? I don't.
Because in the world of capitalism, you have winners and losers.
Right.
And the left cannot abide losers.
That's so true.
Even though they're made up of majority losers.
You know how
they wouldn't be Democrats if they weren't losers.
It feels like that all of their policies are rooted in losing. It's so true. You know, often the Democrats will point to the European countries. Oh, if we could just emulate them. It's just economic bliss over there. It's just utopia. And I had a friend that sent me a report that shows that Mississippi, which is the poorest state in the country, and I've said many times, you agree, hell, even our poor people are wealthier than most of the rest of the world, right? The vast majority of the rest of the world. That's how good we got it here. Well, even Mississippi, we have surpassed Europe's largest economy, being Germany, as measured by GDP per capita. Think about that. The poorest of the 50 states produces more economic output per person than does the number one in Europe. Well, I wonder why. Because if you look at their systems, they're nothing but a bunch of social programs. We only work 6 months a year here. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not much. They're more concerned about your leisure time and all these programs and these guarantees for life. And that breeds complacency and mediocrity. There's no better motivation than if I don't get this done, I don't eat. And that's what American entrepreneurs are all about, and why small businesses are so valuable and produce so much for society. Yeah, I'm on a rant a little bit, and I apologize for that. I'm tired of it, man. I'm tired of the left pointing to everyone that's ever achieved any sort of financial positive outcome as being greedy and uncaring for everybody else. In fact, where the hell do they think the money comes from to take care of the less fortunate in this country? They think it comes from other poor people? Man, oh man. This is the most generous country on the planet by far. And all we want to do, as they're blasting the efforts of DOGE, is get rid of the illegitimate taking of that money and across the gambit of the programs. So if you're against that, I guess, does that mean, Democrats, you condone waste, fraud, and abuse? You support that? I think they do.
Wholeheartedly.
I've said many, you've heard me say many times.
They can't spend enough.
You've heard me say many times a big problem in Medicaid, even though when they know something's wrong, they look the other way. I don't care if it's a provider who's falsifying claims or over-doctoring to produce more income, or if it's people that enroll in the program that aren't legitimately eligible. They just look the other way.
Oh, you mean like the millions of illegals that Biden and Kamala let into the country?
No doubt.
That are just hoovering up your tax dollars and putting more debt on your tab so they can live better than 90% of the world's population and not have to do jack diddly squat while you got to get up and go to work every day. And Uncle Sam's going to take that money out of your check to pay for them to be lazy losers.
It's not right, man. But I tell you, it's changing big time. On the C-Spire text line, it's amazing that they're worried about, talking about the legislature, protecting mom-and-pop liquor stores, but don't worry about other businesses that have been battling internet shipping, tires, and thousands of other items that affect small businesses. Politicians weren't smart enough to realize you can put all the taxes on liquor and wine on the sales and collect through businesses. My understanding,
I think the text got jumbled.
Yeah, is they're building a $90 million warehouse at taxpayer expense and letting a private business run it. Y'all know how well that will work with government getting involved. So Dwayne in Lucedale. So there's a lot to unpack there, Dwayne, but I guess I'm not sure I understand where you stand. Do you support protectionism? I don't. And I understand that the legislature had to tiptoe through this, and I've explained that because we've built our model historically around taxes generated from liquor distribution and retail sales. It's just a big chunk of revenue that comes into the general fund, $120 million a year. Just for comparative purposes, the Lottery Corporation generates an average of $126 million a year. So as far as other businesses battling internet shipping, well, we ended the disparity in sales taxes applied to online selling 5 or 6 years ago. So there's no advantage they get. Do you just want to ban all online sales? I don't. I think it's good for everybody. Consumer choice, economic activity, free markets. Viva, free markets. Yes, they're building a big ABC distribution warehouse, mainly because they can't accommodate demand now. We're actually losing money because of our distribution lack of capacity. Final segment's next.
Are we going to do this? Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Keep rolling. 3, 2, 1. On
SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Wow! I feel good. I knew that I wouldn't. I feel good. I knew that I wouldn't. So good. So good. I got you. Wow! I feel nice. The sugar was fine.
We're back with you in the Element Well studio. Mo says it's funny that Robert Reich uses social media to get his anti-profit message out. Social media is not in the business of providing people a platform. They provide the platform to make a profit. I hear you, Mose.
It's because none of these people actually stand on principle. They just want attention.
Exactly right. And I'll say that applies to those of us who oppose some of these radical social ideologies that they love to promote using social media, and the companies involved in making that digital exchange even possible, they too embraced all those ideologies. Now, there's no doubt that Zuckerberg has had a change of heart. He's found him some Trump, I think it's safe to say. And so he's changed. Remember, they announced they're discontinuing the placement of tampons in the men's bathroom, as an example, about a month ago. And there's been some other announcements come out of Meta as well. But behind the scenes, Rhino, and this is what a lot of people aren't aware of, I think. They just understand, the platform, the tool, the interface itself. There are thousands of companies behind the scenes that make all that possible, to make the electronic exchange, if you will, enabled. I don't know where they all stand from a ideological perspective, but I can assure there are a number that likely don't align with the users who like to blast the companies based on their stances. And they don't know. And I've even seen people justify that. Well, I need it to get the message out. Okay, but you realize every keystroke, as Mo says, every keystroke you type is putting money in their pocket. By the way, guys, that's why it's free. That's why it's free. What really always intrigues me is how people complain about it. It's free. Don't be like the liberals. Don't complain about free. I get it. You don't like certain things. I don't either. But I always have to stop and think, wait, it's free. You want it to be like you want it? Well, then you probably would have to pay for it. That's the way that model works. But I hear you, Mose, no doubt. Dan in Hasburg, Rhino, I foresee a bunch of fiery darts. That's darts with a D heading your way
Bring it on.
From some dumb Democrats. By the way,
it's not like they have the intelligence to actually outwit me.
Exactly. Beef tallow is beef lard, essentially, Danette, Carroll County.
Yeah, that's what McDonald's used to cook their fries in until
they went to the vegetable oil,
got upset
right?
about it, yeah.
Okay. So, and this is because, I don't know if you caught it, Rhino, you were trying to get Matthew on the line for Steak and Shake is announced. They're converting to the use of beef tallow and dropping the use of vegetable oil in their French frying.
That'd be good.
Yeah, and it looks like...
I already had good fries. I'd imagine that'd be even better.
I agree. They're sort of shoestring fries, or kind of infamous, if you will, but it looks like just some reports I'm I'm seeing that there's some of these other fast food restaurants as well are considering the same. So you see how just a small change, and so many times I've said, often it's the messaging that's perhaps more important than the policy. Just the messaging. Hey, we're watching. We think this is bad. We would like to see you change. No policy that I'm aware of. No laws have been enacted, but they responded. Beautiful. It's like Zuckerberg. Okay. Now, Bezos, he's changed the policies there at the Washington Post to the chagrin, by the way, of the deep-seated liberals that work at the organization. They're all mad because he said we're going to be less opinionated in one direction and more news, right? Which is what they should be. And they're all bent out of shape about that. It really is incredible. Well, I'm going to be looking forward to what happens in the speech, in Mr. Trump's speech tomorrow. Can't wait for that. Across the pond, UK Prime Minister Starmer, he's proposed a new plan for Ukraine, wants Europe to increase their spending in Ukraine, says, quote, the UK are prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. That sounds like he's beating the old war drums against Putin and Russia.
There's just one problem with his grand plan.
What's that?
They're going to have to dial back all those social programs the Democrats laud them for if they're going to increase their percentage of GDP spending on defense.
Correct. It's so correct, because we're at the 3%, 3.5% range of our GDP, have been for a long time on defense, and these fools have always been in the 1% range, expecting us to cover the tab because they know we will. And it was President Trump in his first term that brought that to our attention. You got to pay your fair share, Europe. Completely agree. And then on top of that, you tariff the heck out of everything we ship to you. So I'm supporting that. I'm not a fan of tariffs, but I'm a fan of leveraging our assets to produce the best outcome for America. We're out of here today. Richard Marks bumping us out. Back with you again tomorrow. Until then, stay safe and God bless.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.